Welcome everybody. We're going to get started. Tonight is our fifth and final lecture of our series. As you know, I think I mentioned before, this is the fourth series that we've done, so this completes the fourth series, and as of this evening, you are all completing your fourth year of medical school. So, well done. As you know, this is a collaborative effort between Stamford Hospital, our physician relations, and the Darien Library. So we like to thank the Darien Library for hosting us throughout the whole season, the whole series. And can everybody hear me?
Yes.
No?
Yes, it's me.
Everybody else?
Yes.
I'll come closer.
He says we're all fourth-year medical students. You already know I have that problem.
So it's my privilege to introduce tonight's speakers. This evening we have two speakers. We have Dr. Katherine Takayasu and Dr. Danielle Greenman. And Dr. Katie completed her 2-year fellowship in Integrative Medicine at Stamford Hospital's Center for Integrative Medicine and Wellness and at the University of Arizona. She earned her MD and MBA from Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, and completed her undergraduate work at the University of Michigan.
Go Blue!
She completed her residency in family medicine at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Columbia University in New York City, where she served as chief resident. Dr. Danielle Greenman did her undergraduate at Cornell.
Go Big Red!
Completed an internal medicine residency at Yale New Haven Hospital after attending medical school at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. She is currently in the second of 2 years fellowship in the same fellowship, which is the Integrative Medicine at Stamford Hospital. So I welcome the two of you. Thank you for coming tonight. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Takayasu and Dr. Greenman.
Oh my gosh, we're so excited to be here. So thank you for sharing your evening with us. I know it's hard to mobilize on a cold night, and I really appreciate it. Though I'm very happy to be here because I just got myself out of bedtime routine at my house, which is a big 45-minute ordeal where you just want to like tear your hair out. So I'm really happy to be here with all of you and not doing that with my twin 5-year-olds. So we're going to talk about abdominal pain, and we titled our talk Below the Belt, an integrative approach. And so we're going to go over not only abdominal pain and a lot of the different reasons that people have abdominal pain, but also how we think about it a little bit differently than maybe your primary care doctor or even your gastroenterologist. So we have no disclosures, but if anyone would like to pay us to, be a spokesperson for them, we're happy to oblige. So let us know after hours. So we'll first talk about what integrative medicine is so that you get an idea of what this field of medicine is. It's a little bit newer, and so for that reason we want to really hone in on what that means. We'll talk about the different reasons that people have abdominal pain, both for men and for women. And then we're going to kind of hone in on a really common reason for abdominal pain called irritable bowel syndrome and talk a little bit more about the specific management of that. And then, of course, every integrative conversation is rounded out by what we call like the 3+1. That's how you move, how you sleep, and how you eat, and making sure that you attend to your personal or spiritual self. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. So I love this quote from the World Health Organization. They put this out in 1948, and how wise they were back then, and still how far we have to come in our medical system. The WHO said that health is a state of complete physical, social, and mental well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So this idea that taking care of the whole person and really working towards a model of wellness is the way that we should go. But really, you guys know this as well as I do, that when we go to the doctor, it's really a disease management model. We're not really promoting wellness. And so that's what integrative medicine strives to do. The reason this happened, the reason that we are more of a disease management model in the United States is because historically, most of the things that were taking us out, meaning that were the top causes of death, were actually more public health issues. They were infections, so things like pneumonia and tuberculosis. Though pneumonia these days is still one of the more top causes of death. But those kinds of things actually decreased as our public health increased in America. And then what happened is lifestyle started taking over. So lifestyle influenced the causes of death. So things like stroke and heart attack, cancer, those kinds of things were more related to lifestyle. And so integrative medicine really strives to approach the lifestyle as the most important thing.
So exactly as Dr. Katie was just mentioning, what is integrative medicine, how we got there, the WHO defined health as kind of a full multimodal approach to a person's well-being. And then you had disease, germs, penicillin came, we realized we can treat those things, and then we ended up not moving, not sleeping, not eating, and we developed disease. Just as Dr. Katie said, cancers, strokes, cardiovascular disease, but luckily, we're bringing kind of ancient and traditional modalities, such as Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine. Both types of medicine are considered a whole systems-based medicine. So up until kind of your traditional allopathic medicine was created, allopathy being your traditional MD, people had their systems of medicine. So in Ayurveda, there were concepts that your health is actually influenced by your diet, by your lifestyle, by your sleep. And there's a term called nadanam, which means just that your health is influenced by those things. And in traditional Chinese medicine, well, as you learn, there's a complete balance. There's the yin and the yang and your qi. And so when the system gets out of balance, we become ill. And so it took us a while to catch up to these ancient practices of medicine and health. And that is that is what integrative medicine is. It takes traditional Western medicine, as you see us, MDs, and we bring in evidence-based complementary modalities. And so those include things, so that is by definition a biopsychosocial model. So we understand that your health, your biology, is influenced by your mind and your spirit. You can't dissect those things. We exist as one. Going back to the whole system in Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine of the yin and the yang and the duality of one spirit. We practice in a very patient-centered care. The emphasis is on our relationship with you at the center. And we utilize all appropriate therapies. So maybe that's MindBody and guided imagery, or mindfulness-based meditation, therapy, acupuncture, trigger point injections for pain. And these are all things that there's evidence and science behind, and we bring in to a traditional insurance-based model. And so this is where we practice at Stamford Hospital. And so we practice integrative medicine as health coaching. Food is the essential of all medicine in all the different types of whole systems practices I just mentioned. And also for us as integrative physicians, you are what you eat. We make exercise recommendations very specific and tailored to our patients' needs, complementary pain managements, make botanical medicine recommendations, supplements, and herbs, and take patients through guided imagery and introduce them to different forms of meditation. So no.
That was a really great graphic.
That was a great graphic.
I wonder if we can pull it back up. Let's see.
Oh, this was the other one. Do you have it on yours?
She took it out. That's okay. I'll look. You start talking. I'll look for it.
So I want to tell you, we're going to find this graphic because it's a really good one. So I want to tell you about the nervous system in general. So you have three parts of your nervous system. You have your central nervous system, which is what you know as your brain, and I know as our brain. You have your peripheral nervous system, so that's what makes my arms and my legs move, and that runs from your spinal cord to your muscles, your peripheral system. So my brain says, okay, I need to move, sends a signal to my spinal cord, and I'm moving, or I'm talking, or we're interacting, or we're hugging. But then there's this third part of the nervous system that we can't see and that we don't necessarily, we're not aware that we have control of. And that's your autonomic nervous system. And as the name denotes, it's automatic. And so what is, there it is, perfect. What is your autonomic nervous system? So that is divided into two parts. It's your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. So I want you all, we'll go through the right side and the left side together for a second, but I want to take you on a journey. You are trying to get to the train station in Stamford, and I-95 is not moving, and someone just cut you off, and the radio is giving some annoying ad, and your kid has a cold, and you have to think about what to do for dinner when you get home in 8 hours, and, right? You are on the go. Your heart may be going a little fast, palms get a little sweaty. So this is your fight or flight. And so this is traditionally because as we evolved, we were out and gathering, right, and hunting. So I need to know, oh, I recognize that thing that has hair and that is roaring at me, that is a lion. And I need to get up and go. So what am I going to do? My pupils are going to expand so that I can see what I'm running away from, because I don't want to fall, because I'm running from this lion that's going to bite me. I'm breathing fast and shallow so that I can oxygenate, so provide energy to my muscles so I can run as I'm seeing. And my heart is beating faster to support the movement of that blood and that oxygenation that's going on in my lungs. And my gut stops. But why is my gut stopping? Why is this part of the off button on the parasympathetics and the on for the sympathetics? Because I don't need to absorb nutrition. When I'm running away from that lion, I need to run. I don't need to go to the bathroom. I don't need to take part in pleasurable activities that are part of my left side, the calm and parasympathetic. My stress sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight. It's time to go. But now, I'd like to bring you to the left side, your parasympathetic. And if you will indulge me for a minute, before I explain it to you, why don't we just feel it? So I'd like you all to bring to mind a memory, something or a sight. Maybe it's a beach, it's a hug from a family member, whatever brings you peace and calm. But I want you to feel it, see it, taste it, and smell it. And when you are there, let me know, give me your eyes, and I'll know to go to the next part. Okay, so this next part is a 3-part breath work. So I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to count you through, inhaling for 3, then we'll hold our breath together for 3, and then we'll exhale for 3. And on the exhale, I'd like you to bring that memory into your mind, that whole experience. So close your eyes if you feel comfortable. And inhale, 2, 3, hold the breath, 2, 3, and exhale and visualize, 2, 3. Inhale, 2, 3, hold your breath, 2, 3, exhale and visualize, 2, 3. Inhale, 2, 3, hold your breath, 2, 3, and exhale, 2, 3. And when you're ready, I'd like you to come back to the room and open your eyes. That's the relaxation response. That was termed by a doctor named Henry Benson out of Harvard in the late 60s, early 70s. And that was incredible because what we just did is we took control of our autonomic nervous system, what we think we don't have control of. So why do we want the parasympathetic? That's our rest and digest, right? So most importantly, our gut is active right now. So if you are calm, and when your parasympathetics turn on, I'm not afraid of the lion. I'm sitting, we've gathered, we've cooked together. I now can start pumping out pancreatic enzymes, biliary enzymes. I'm chewing my food, so I'm breaking down enzymes with my mouth. I'm ready to digest food properly so that by the time it gets to my stomach, I can absorb all those nutrients. That doesn't happen if I'm in the stress response when I'm eating. But my pupils have shrunk because I can look at what's right in front of me. I don't need to see beyond. I'm slow and deep in my breathing because I don't need to pump oxygen everywhere. It's going to my gut and it's going to kind of just keep things running. I'm not in survival mode, I'm in rest and digest. And so that's probably the quickest I can explain the nervous system in a year's worth of neurology, right? So that is your central nervous system, the brain, your peripheral nervous system, the spinal cord, into the hands and the feet, and then you have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic that goes pretty much throughout your whole body, with the majority of the neurons being actually in your gut and in your abdomen. So why does my belly hurt? Right, there are countless reasons why one's belly can hurt. So let's break it down to men, women, and both. So what are the organs that we all have in men and women? I'm going to go from the belly button and below, right, because it brings in a whole nother list of diseases and organs if I go above. So I have my belly button in there. I have, right underneath, I have some muscles and fascia. And as I go in, this is men and women. We're taking reproductive organs out for now. I have my appendix, then my colon descends, I have my rectum, and then I have my anus. As a woman, I have, and we both, men and women, have pelvic floor muscles, and that's pretty much what we share. Then we have the female reproductive organs in here, where I have my uterus, ovaries, cervix, we both have bladders and urethras, and then men have a prostate and testicles and other reproductive organs. So any of these organ systems can lead to disease. So if I'm thinking of my colon or my appendix and the pain came on all of a sudden, I worry about appendicitis. If I'm noticing that my stool has changed in size and caliber, and there's some caliber meaning shape and size, and I'm having some blood or dark colored stools, I'm worried about maybe that there's a cancer. Less likely, but those are the things I worry about when I hear cancer. I worry, what does my poop look like? Have I lost weight? Am I having night sweats? Those are your red flags. Usually that's not the case. Am I having blood in my stool and fevers? Is there an inflammatory component? Is this ongoing? Was I traveling or drinking water? Do I have an infection in my colon? For men, there's chronic prostatitis, so inflammation of the prostate. There's urethritis, inflammation of the urethra, the connection from the bladder out through the penis or the vagina. There's cystitis, so inflammation of the bladder itself. And the list can go on, but those are pretty much the big things that we're concerned about. So IBS, what are we talking about here today? And so most of the time, that's not what's going on, what I just talked about. Usually it's IBS. And why are we in kind of the IBS zone and it's not always one of the other we call it a differential? Why is it not the other things I just mentioned? And it's usually because there's a disconnect with our autonomic nervous system. So it's not functioning the way we want because we're stressed. And moving forward, Dr. Katie's going to talk a little bit about IBS and the pathology behind it.
So irritable bowel syndrome affects a lot of people, and we see it a lot in our practice, and it presents in a lot of different ways. So it's a really complex disorder because, as Dr. Danielle talked about, it's really this very perfect marriage, or I guess divorce maybe, between the autonomic nervous system and then what's actually happening in our guts and our functional sort of system. And so the characteristics of IBS are when you have abdominal pain or discomfort, maybe accompanied by bloating or gas, and also an altered bowel habit, meaning that you're either having constipation or diarrhea or some kind of difference than having a normal stool once every day in the morning that looks perfectly smooth and wonderful. And in fact, I was just talking to another group of patients and community people last night, and we were talking about what our bowel habits should look like, because a lot of us don't really know because we only know what we experience. But I became very aware of bowel habits once I had children, and I realized because children have so much energy, so much chi, that they actually poop really well. And so if you look in the bowl of a child, they generally go about once a day. It's pretty soft, it's easy to get out. There's no, there's no blood in it, there's no mucus in it. It looks perfectly brown. It's not too dark, not too light. It's just Goldilocks. It's just perfect on every level. And so that's how we should be stooling too, but many of us are not. Some of us are going many, many days in between bowel movements. Some of us are having multiple bowel movements a day. Sometimes they're too runny, sometimes they're too stiff. And so really looking at the gut and how things are functioning is actually a really great example of how our bodies are actually processing what we eat. So there's a lot of biopsychosocial components. This goes back to this idea what Dr. Danielle was talking about, that we in integrative medicine really identify patients not only as their body, the scientific part, but also their spirits and their minds as well. There's also some thought that IBS could have some genetic or environmental considerations. So sometimes people will have sensitivities to food. I always say that not everybody is made to eat every food. So if you eat something and it gives you a stomach ache or it alters your bowel, then that's probably not such a great food for you to eat. Sometimes it's things like broccoli that give us gas, and people are like, oh, okay, I'm not going to eat broccoli anymore, and that's all fine, right? But what if you get gas or diarrhea if you eat dairy? Isn't that so sad that you might not really be able to eat dairy? But that's just the way that the universe has made your body. And the other thing that we know about the way that IBS works is that there's usually a disarray in the gut microbiome. So all of us have about 2 kilos, so about 4 or 5 pounds worth of probiotics, meaning good bacteria that live in our intestines. Isn't that totally crazy? 5 pounds. And so if we're not taking good care of those bacteria, they can actually get out of whack, and we can have too many bad and not enough good. And then there's this idea of increased gut permeability. And so all of us, and if you can imagine like this being the inside of my intestines and this sort of being the inside of the body, all of us have really tight junctions that protect the body from the food that's going through, so that stuff doesn't get into the body before the body's ready to receive it. But what happens is if there's been inflammation or there's been insults to the bowel in one reason or another, those tight junctions get a bit leaky and they start letting in things that aren't supposed to be there. And once those things get into your body before they're supposed to be there, those undigested food particles, your body sends off a warning light because it doesn't like the way that feels. And that can lead to worsening bowel symptoms and some of the abdominal pain that people feel. There's also altered gut motility. So gut motility is how fast your gut moves things through your system. Generally, most people have gut motility somewhere around like a day. So once you eat something, it usually shows up on the other end about a day later. But if you're eating something and it's taking several days to get out, then you know that you have altered or slow gut motility. Or the vice versa, if it's going too fast, you know that your gut motility is very, very quick. If it's too slow, then you're probably pulling too much water off of your stool and it's probably getting very hard. If it's going very fast, your body's trying to help you and it's putting more water into the system, probably making your stool loose. The best way to know if you have good gut motility is actually to eat something that will show up in your stool. This is so gross, right? But seriously, go and eat some beets, like a lot of beets. Like eat a lot, maybe a couple cups worth of beets. Or eat like a nice big ear of corn. And you'll see it on the other end. And if you see it in about a day, you know your gut motility is probably pretty good. If it takes a couple days or it's way too soon, then you know that things are a little bit off. We also think that there might be a role of infections in how IBS sort of transpires. And so most patients who come in, if I ask them, like, well, when did these symptoms start? When did you start having like all this diarrhea and abdominal pain? They'll say, you know what? It started when I went to Mexico and I drank the water there and I got an infection. And somehow that infection sort of, I don't know, I guess is the sort of the tip of the iceberg. It just sets off this chain reaction in the body. And so kind of getting that history from people can be helpful. And then we'll sort of talk about this a little bit, but there's this newer idea of what's called SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And this is the idea that the good bacteria are outweighed by the bad bacteria. And there are some things that you can do to help that as well. So eubiosis is when everything in the gut is working really great. That means you have the normal microflora, so if we were to measure it or look at a stool test, we could actually see that there's a wide variety of good bacteria. It protects you against infection, meaning everything is functioning as it's supposed to be. There's also great tolerance to food, so you all know those people who have the stomach of steel, who can basically eat anything and have no issues. We all hate them. Those kinds of people have really, really good tolerance to food and generally have very good protection against problems with infection and inflammation. We also know that when you have eubiosis, you have very good digestion, and you're also able to actually harvest energy from your food, because that's why we eat in the first place, right? Is because we need to fuel our bodies. If we're not really digesting our food very well, then obviously we're not getting much energy from our food. And sometimes this manifests as weight loss. Other times it manifests in other ways. I'll measure vitamins in my patients. I'll measure like B vitamins, which are, a lot of them are processed in the intestine, and we'll see that they're actually really low. And that's a good sign to us that people aren't really absorbing things from their food. And then dysbiosis is that opposite, of course, of eubiosis. Dysbiosis is overproduction or overpresentation of harmful species and not enough of the good ones that keep us healthy. And it either leads to dysfunction just in the gut, or it can actually lead to dysfunction systemically. And by systemically, I mean kind of all over the body. So oftentimes when Danielle and I are thinking about patients and we see like a strange sort of complex of symptoms, and that might be like a skin condition or other things that are going on in the body, along with alteration in stools, then we start to think like, oh, maybe the gut flora is off a little bit. And there's a lot of association of dysbiosis, or too much bad bacteria, with some of the different diseases that we listed here. So what we're going to do now is sort of talk about management of functional abdominal pain. And of course, an optimal treatment plan is multimodal, meaning that it's not just medicine, it's not just mind-body therapy, it's not just acupuncture, it's all these things together. So we really do go over pharmaceutical things with patients, that'd be like traditional medicines. We talk about the emotional components of IBS management as well as lifestyle. We talked about that when we started. And then we always address the underlying contributors, so things like stress, maybe inflammation from other conditions that might be happening, and as well as problematic nutrition. And let me tell you, America, we have some problematic nutrition. So I'll let Danielle start with some of the pharmaceutical stuff.
So for IBS particularly, there's several pharmaceutical approaches, and it depends what we think the underlying cause is. Sometimes it's a nervous system issue, and we can use SSRIs, which are selective serotonin receptor inhibitors. So it's a type of antidepressant. Tricyclic antidepressants work on the neurons as well and are incredibly effective. There's an antibiotic called rifaximin, which is used in the gut and it's not absorbed into our system, so it just stays in the gut and basically kills off all of that bad bacteria, that 5 pounds of dysbiosis. And then we start from scratch and we rebuild the gut flora with food and probiotics. There's was several studies done comparing herbal remedies compared to xifaxamine, and the herbal remedies are candibactin, AR, and BR. One is oregano oil and some other essential oils, and the other is berberine with skullcap and some traditional Chinese herbs, and those were equally as effective. So if antibiotics is not kind of in line with your goals and your value system, there are herbal remedies that are equally as effective. And xifaxamine is sometimes not covered by insurance and can be quite expensive. If you feel like your IBS is that spasmodic type, I just really need to go to the bathroom and it's going to explode, you can go and there's antispasmodics for that, and antidiarrheals. Imodium is very common. And if you're constipated, there's increasing fiber, so you can take Metamucil, psyllium, Miralax. So Miralax is psyllium, but just marketed differently. Another type of management, apart from pharmaceutical, is, did I go twice? Yeah, is making sure that we have the right bacteria. So there are lots of studies showing that introducing probiotics into the system, I think almost 78% of patients that have IBS have some form of dysbiosis. So introducing probiotics has a significant improvement in symptoms. So some that we recommend to patients often, VSL is probably your most expensive because there's a pharmaceutical company behind it because they put in money for the evidence behind it. So it's been studied to improve inflammatory bowel disease and irritable bowel disease, but it can cost upwards to $50 to $80 a month. VSL is good because it has multiple strains of bacteria, up to 8. Florastor is another one. Florastor with Saccharomyces was studied specifically with antibiotic use. So if you're on, maybe you have diverticulitis and you need ciproflagyl, that would be a great probiotic to start while you're in the hospital or when you're home and on antibiotics. Philips Colon Health is a much more affordable option and still a great option at $16 a month. And Integrative Therapeutics is a pharmaceutical grade nutraceutical company, and they have, and we don't get any money or funding from them, they have a lot of really good options, one of them being the therapeutic probiotic pearls and a few other digestive kind of compounds that have multiple strains. So there's botanicals, so chamomile tea works as an antispasmodic. It's an anti-inflammatory and it relaxes the gut and relaxes the mind. That's why we take it before bedtime often. Turmeric is an anti-inflammatory, both for the gut and for the body. So curcumin or turmeric is talked a lot about in the press recently, but it's important to know if you're taking it for joint pains, eat it with food because you need pepperine to absorb it systemically. But if your gut, which is pepper, if your gut is inflamed or you have IBS, take the turmeric or the curcumin. Curcumin is just the active ingredient in turmeric on an empty stomach because you want that turmeric to be focused on the gut itself. And lemon balm is a plant that's related to the mint family. You can grow it on your own. At the Tully Center, there is, I think, lemon balm growing wild everywhere in the back from one plant. It's like mint, just once you have one, you have like weeds. But it's wonderful and it's used traditionally as an anxiolytic, meaning anti-anxiety. So it calms the nervous system down. And it's also great for sleep. Magnesium is a great supplement. You would be surprised, I'm surprised at how many people are actually magnesium deficient, and by the time we test your blood and your magnesium levels are low, your red blood cell magnesium is actually even lower. So magnesium is a great supplement. It's great if you have constipation, predominant IBS. If you suffer from palpitations or migraines, it helps with that too. Ginger is a prokinetic, meaning it helps movement. And flaxseed is a great option. It's rich in omega-3s. You need to grind it, which is available in stores. The oil, if you buy flaxseed oil, goes rancid very quickly as soon as any air gets into the bottle. So what we recommend for patients to do is go buy flaxseed, the actual seeds, put them in a coffee grinder for the day that you want to use them, and then keep them in the freezer and you can use them just like that.
So now we're going to circle back to the mind-body part of IBS management. And so Danielle talked about this, of course, earlier when she led us to that great exercise where we're on 95 and then we were in our happy place. How many of you guys actually got to your happy place, like when she was talking about that? Yeah? So I did too. Like I literally was standing here and I got to my happy place. And this is a place I go to in my mind often. And literally within 2 or 3 seconds, I started to get these like tingles down my body. And it's amazing just thinking about that one thing because I've revisited it so often. I mean, it's a memory I have from when my children were really little. And so for 5 years now, I've been visiting this same memory. And now, within seconds, I can get to this place of like complete relaxation in my body. And so the mind-body response is so powerful, but it really takes our attention to really hone that skill. And so we know that because of the parasympathetic nervous system, or that fight or flight response, or the rest and digest response, that we need to spend more time kind of relaxing our bodies, because most of us don't really do that. And the reason we need to do that is because IBS management really hones in on really harnessing that mind-body response because it's so helpful. And we know that IBS symptoms are worse with stress. And so often when I talk to patients about like what's driving their symptoms, they'll say like, you know, every time that I hang out with my mother-in-law, my symptoms get worse. And seriously, like you recognize that pattern, you're like, oh, obviously there's a stress component. And it feels like that eureka moment for the patient when they're like, oh my God, like my stress actually makes this worse. But our stress makes almost everything worse. Most of my patients who have chronic pain will say, yeah, when I'm really stressed out about X, I notice that my pain is worse. And it's like, eureka, you're right. Like if we can hone in our stress response, maybe we can make things feel a little bit better. And there's a lot of studies that have been done to show that mind-body stuff really does work for IBS. And so we know that exercises like mindfulness or mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is MBSR, things like yoga can be helpful. There's even hypnotherapy, meaning hypnosis for the gut. And if you can do gut-directed hypnotherapy, that can help your IBS symptoms too. The world is really your oyster at this point. I'm going to let Danielle talk about this because it's like over my pay grade. No, I'm just kidding. She loves the science stuff.
So, where did you go? Has anyone ever experienced that, or have your kids ever asked you that, or your partner, or whomever? You're in the middle of a conversation and then you kind of go somewhere else, or you're trying to focus and you're just not. And so there is something called the default mode network. And so this is the default mode network. It's between your prefrontal cortex and your anterior cingulate cortex. And so we've studied this, not we, but...
So this is your prefrontal cortex.
Thank you.
And your anterior cingulate cortex is right there. And so there's a connection between those two things.
And so we've studied with functional MRI how often people go into this default mode network. And so why does it matter? Why are we talking about the default mode network? So the prefrontal cortex is our CEO, right? It says, let's do this, let's go. And your anterior cingulate cortex is the part of the brain that manages your self-narrative, the emotion, etc. And so when we are kind of in that default mode, we're in the part of our brain that drives our self-narrative emotionally. So we are constantly dwelling. Have you ever realized I can't get out of my head, and something that you have a fear and anxiety about something that hasn't actually happened or doesn't exist, and you just keep going there? And so that's what happens when we're in our default mode network, because it actually takes us out of the present moment and puts us in our mind, in our own self-narrative, where there's emotion and kind of where reality doesn't actually always exist. And these studies show that the longer period of time we spend in this default mode network between our prefrontal cortex and our anterior cingulate cortex, the higher the rates of anxiety, the higher the rates of depression, the higher the rates of functional abdominal pain. And so that's kind of a little depressing if there's nothing we can do about our default mode network. But there is. So the way I like to tell patients about the default mode network is imagine when you're at your computer screen and you get distracted and you pick up the phone, and then by the time you go back, that light is kind of going around, that beam of lights. Yes, I got one head shake. And so we shake the mouse and the screen comes back. We can turn the default mode network off. And we know that because we've studied it with functional MRIs. Functional MRIs are, you inject some glucose and metabolically active material. You put your brain into an MRI machine, and then we ask you to either think or to meditate or to do nothing, and we see which parts of the brain are lighting up. And the parts of the brain that light up correlate with the amount of energy used in that part of the brain. So where did we go? We're in the default mode network. We're in our screensaver. With meditation, with mindfulness exercise, with yoga, this turns off. So we have taken control of our autonomic nervous system. We have taken control of our monkey minds. We come back to the present, which is pretty cool. Just thinking about being in the moment and focusing on it, which is hard, right? My posture, I'm noticing, my shoulders all of a sudden, but I'm standing up because I'm practicing the same way I practice lifting weights to build a muscle. This is a muscle, this is a skill set, and this can be learned.
And by the way, I'm so sorry, I pointed to the wrong parts of the brain. I didn't realize that this second image was a mirror of the first. And so I apologize, I was pointing at the wrong parts, but we were talking about the anterior cingulate cortex, and the prefrontal cortex is right here as well. And then what we were pointing to, the other part was the posterior cingulate cortex. So I apologize, I messed up on that because I didn't realize what I was looking at. I didn't want you, don't ask me to do your brain surgery, okay? That is the lesson here. So coming back to MindBody, there's a lot of ways to harness what Danielle is talking about. In our practice, we teach patients progressive muscle relaxation. We teach them guided imagery. We can teach you a little bit of mindfulness. We can teach you breathing exercises. But you can certainly expand this into the rest of your life. So thinking about things like Tai Chi or yoga, which are great for 1,000 other reasons, but are also good because they help you harness the mind-body response. And so if I would encourage you to do one thing after this lecture on your own, it'd be to explore a mind-body thing that seems really cool to you. There's other parts about the mind-body connection that are really important. That's about sort of being present in our own lives. It's really easy to go about the day and really not be present in what we're doing. You know, we tie our shoes, we go for walks, we drive places. We may even have conversations with people where we're not really tuned in. And so I encourage you to spend, even after you leave the lecture today, just spend your walk to your car and your drive home actually paying attention. And pay attention to things like, oh my gosh, like I never knew there was a yellow sign there. Like, did you ever know that mailbox over there was red? And you will start to notice all sorts of things you've never noticed before because you've been in your default mode network thinking in your head and not really paying attention. But we know that the more that we pay attention or are mindful in our daily activities, actually the happier we are. There have been many studies to show that. And so if we can be present in our daily lives, be present with our family, be present with our friends, and even just be present with ourselves, we tend to be a little bit happier. So we were, just to kind of round out our conversation tonight, we would be remiss without talking about things like exercise and food. So we'll talk about that very, very briefly, but know that these are super important things to us, and that when we see patients that we spend a lot of time on these. So we know that exercise is really important for the management of functional bowel issues, and there's a lot of evidence to show that. So when I say exercise, I mean like getting about 20 minutes of movement a day. And in my mind, exercise really should be about having fun. It should be good to feel good to move. It should be something that you enjoy. And there's of course cardiovascular benefit to exercise, but the number one reason to exercise is the reason that it actually is as effective as an antidepressant in our lives. So when people come to me and they're saying, I'm so stressed, I'm so anxious, I'm so depressed, my first mode of operation is to get them moving, because we know that it stimulates neurochemical release and makes us feel better. And then, of course, strength training is really important for a whole variety of other reasons. We also know that food is really important. In general, you get out of your body what you put in, and if you put bad stuff in your body, then generally bad stuff is going to come out, or you're going to have gas or bloating or stool alteration or a number of other things go wrong. But generally, we talk about food like medicine, and so if we really start with a very good diet, and we can certainly help you figure that out, then generally the body tends to work a little bit better. And just like I mentioned before, not everybody's made to eat every food. So if something doesn't feel good when you eat it, then that's probably a sign that that's not something that your body really likes. The most important thing when it comes to diet is a Mediterranean diet. Most people do pretty well with a Mediterranean diet. In studies where we've compared the Mediterranean diet to things like the American Heart Association low-fat diet, the Mediterranean diet wins hands down. So these are things like vegetables and fruits. Remember you can see that I put vegetables first because those are the most important. It also includes things like whole grains, monounsaturated fat, high quality lean protein. I prefer from plants mostly, but animals are good too. And also omega-3s. And so these are things, the fatty oils that are found in like our cold water fishes like salmon, halibut, black cod. But there are a ton of plant sources of omega-3s as well. So if you're vegan or you don't want to eat animal products for any other reason, then you can certainly find them in things like flax and chia, walnuts. These also tend to be really high fiber things, so they end up helping a lot of irritable bowel symptoms as well. And generally you need to follow the 80-20 rule, which means it matters what you do about 80% of the time. So you don't have to be perfect about your diet. In fact, you may see me on a Thursday night having a cheeseburger and it's delicious, but I'm not eating that every day. There is some evidence out there that changing up the nutrition, meaning actually doing a little bit of an elimination diet of sorts, can be very helpful. One that's been studied quite extensively is the low FODMAP diet. And this is a diet that takes out certain types of foods that actually cause the body to release more water into the bowel, and generally to get rid of them because of the fermentation process tend to lead to more of the IBS symptoms. So following a low FODMAP diet can be helpful. Interestingly, low FODMAP foods include things like glutinous products, also includes a lot of different dairy products, but it also includes things like stone fruits, so things like apples and pears and avocados, as well as some other vegetables and some other foods. But if you notice that you eat certain things and it kind of upsets your tummy, you can actually sort of start looking at the low FODMAP list, and you could see, like, are some of the foods that bother me ones that are on this list, and maybe taking them out temporarily could be really helpful for you. And we want to just kind of round this discussion on nutrition out by talking about manipulation of our gut flora. So one of the most important things that you can do is actually eat a little bit of fermented food in your life. And fermented foods are natural sources of probiotics. So rather than spending $50 to $80 a month on VSL3, you could just walk to your friendly Whole Foods and get some kombucha, or some kefir, or you could get some yogurt, or you could get some kimchi, or some other fermented food that might appeal to you. And all of these foods that are listed up here are really rich in those probiotics, so they really help our digestion to work. And generally, most probiotics only last in our system for about 3 weeks, so you really need to be eating your probiotics on a regular basis for them to work. And then I have in quotations or in parentheses down there fecal transplants, because there's been some emerging evidence that if you have really refractory issues with your bowels, that you can actually transplant the freeze-dried, capsulated form of someone else's healthy poop into your system with a capsule. And so that's still being studied. Obviously not something that we promote at this juncture because we just don't have enough evidence to show that it works. But for some people who are very, very desperate and have access to getting these things from other places, it has been known to help a little bit. And then we'll just finish up real quick, and then we'll take some questions on acupuncture. So both Danielle and I practice acupuncture, meaning we provide it for our patients, and we both receive it as well. And I love acupuncture. I think acupuncture is a really beautiful way to tap into that sort of deeper part of ourselves that allows the relaxation response to really shine through. And in traditional Chinese medicine, everything in our body is governed by qi, and qi is our vital life energy. And when we have abdominal pain, or we have a headache, or something is going wrong in our body, or we have too heavy of a menstrual period, or whatever, the idea is that the qi is out of balance. And so if we can work with nutrition and exercise and sleep to kind of get things going in the right direction, you can also use acupuncture needles to help the qi move in the right way in the body. And so in Chinese medicine, the way that we think about IBS is that we extrapolate qi, or energy, from our food. And that's governed by the spleen and the stomach meridians and the organs. We think about Chinese medicine organs a little bit differently than Western organs. But what happens in IBS basically is that the liver qi kind of invades the spleen's energy. And sometimes that presents, as your altered abdominal symptoms and your other symptoms. And what you can do is treat those kinds of disarray in the body with acupuncture needles. In Chinese medicine, they also use things like qigong, which is energy in movement. And they also use, of course, dietary manipulation as well. There are whole lists and books of foods in Chinese medicine that are warming or cooling or move qi through the digestive system or slow down the qi if it's going too fast. And so really manipulating your diet in that way can be helpful.
So in the last 5 minutes before we start taking questions, we want to practice, but we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how we can get either ourselves or our patients or our children or our spouses or our loved ones to the table with us, right? So we know and we've studied that if we're threatened, we have resistance to persuasion. So how many people, no one in this room is overweight, but if you were overweight, that your doctor said, your eating is killing you, or your smoking is going to give you lung cancer. It's true. What your doctor is telling you is 100% true. Smoking leads to lung cancer, overeating, and lifestyle leads to disease. And we kind of just talked for an hour about that. But if we said, tell me 10 things that you did this week that led to you feeling better or that promoted your wellness, we might have a discussion that then leads to permanent change. And so we include this slide because it's important when you interact with each other to remember that, and with yourself. So when I ask myself, oh, I didn't go to the gym today, I had that cheeseburger, okay, I did. What did I do today that was good for my health? And ask yourself those questions, because those positive affirmations will lead to change. You will progress when you remind yourself of the things that you're doing, because change, positive change, is synergistic, right? So if I realize that, oh, hey, I parked an extra row that I almost didn't, and then I circled the parking lot and I parked a little farther, I had about 20 extra steps. Those 20, yeah, I did that. I'm more likely to do it the next time, and I'm more likely to maybe even park over at the police station I saw. I like that the police station and the library are next to each other. Good sign. So we want to teach you one last meditation before we go. I'm going to read you why the loving meditation is important, and then I'm going to take the slides out so we can practice. So this meditation produced increases in a person's daily experience of positive emotions, which in turn produced increases in a wide range of personal resources. So I had, just by this loving kindness meditation, which I'm going to teach you, I felt more purpose in life, not keep the studies, increased social support, and decreased illness symptoms. By doing a short meditation of 3 minutes, I think the study was between 3 weeks, 6 weeks, and 8 weeks, I felt less ill. And if I'm feeling less ill and I feel more satisfaction, I'm not going to really feel those depressive symptoms that come up when I didn't park my car 20 feet away. I didn't make it to the gym. I ate the cheeseburger. I didn't. And so, I'm going to press exit because I want to make sure that I have it correct. And I'm going to unplug this so you can't see my cheat sheet. So I'm going to okay. I'm going to ask you all, can you hear me? Okay, still? Okay. To sit as comfortably as you can and close your eyes. There's going to be 3 parts of this meditation, actually 5, excuse me, and just bear with me. So I'd like you to put one hand on your heart and start by directing the following phrase to yourself. May I be happy. May I know love. May I be peaceful. Next, let's visualize or sense someone you feel thankful for or someone who has helped you and direct the phrase to them. May you be happy. May you know love. May you be peaceful. Now visualize someone you may feel neutral about. People you neither like nor dislike. This one actually can be harder than you'd think. And direct the phrase to them. May you be happy. May you know love. May you be peaceful. Ironically, the next one can be a bit easier. Direct your attention and visualize someone who you don't like or who you are having a hard time with. And when you're ready, direct the phrase to them. May you be happy. May you know love. May you be peaceful. And finally, let's direct the metta towards everyone universally. May all beings everywhere be happy. May all beings know love. May all beings be peaceful. And when you're ready, I invite you to the room. It feels so good to do, doesn't it? So we could do a few more breathing exercises, but I think because of time, it's better to take your questions. We really want to thank you for your time and attention. It's a privilege to share our knowledge and our passions with you, and to promote lifestyle and well-being. It's for both of us, I think, a dream come true.
Absolutely.
So questions?
Does insurance cover integrative medicine?
Yes. It's a great question. Not for all practices, but for our practice, we are an insurance-based model. So with any kind of medicine, right, you have several different types of business models. You can have an insurance-based model. You can have a membership model, so you pay a membership and you have access to your providers, or a pay-for-service, right? I want to come once and it costs $400. But we believe very strongly, and the reason why we work in this model is we want our patients to have access to us. And so we are an insurance-based model.
So we take all commercial insurers plus Medicare.
And where's your office?
Our office is at the Tully Center in Stamford. Yep. That's where all those beautiful pictures came from. I always joke when I walk in the front door that I'm more relaxed there than I am in my own home. It's a really, really zen-like atmosphere. And just walking in the door, you start to notice that things feel differently there. And so it's a really peaceful place to practice medicine. It's a really peaceful place to see patients as well. Yeah, just stop in the next time you're at the Tully Center. grab a little cup of tea at the cafe and just come in and see it. It's really lovely. Sure.
Regarding the Mediterranean diet, I noticed that olive oil was not mentioned. Does olive oil have a place?
Absolutely.
And can olive oil be used as a dietary supplement?
So the question is about olive oil, and the olive oil was included under monounsaturated fatty acids. So if I had had much more time to talk about diet, then we would have gone into all of those things. But you are absolutely right. Things that are rich in monounsaturated fatty acids are things like avocados and olives and olive oil, other really great stuff. But it's right there under monounsaturated fat. No worries.
Way to get it. We don't have a TV at home. We don't have a computer. We don't have a smartphone. We don't have an answering machine. And we only listen to the radio to listen to the weather.
You know what?
And
What
we
she's
go to Mass
describing.
every day.
And she goes to Mass every day. So what are you describing? You're describing a present life,
When
right?
I say the rosary when I get up, and then, or actually when I'm exercising, about 45 minutes.
You and Grandma Margie could be best friends. Oh my
I do
gosh.
use the computer here to use the mind games to keep an eye on.
It's good stuff, but what you're describing is a very present life, right? You're describing a life without so many distractions, and you're also describing a life that's present to the spiritual part of you, right? So for you, Catholicism speaks to you.
Yeah.
For others, it's yoga. For others, it's Islam. You know, whatever the way that speaks to your heart.
There was also an article in the British Journal of Medicine that said they did a study on Catholics who said the rosary and Buddhists who said the mantras. It was good for the heart.
Absolutely.
Insurance covered.
That's
I forget
right.
what issue, it's a long time ago, but the British Journal took up rosary prayer in the British one.
Absolutely. So attending to your spiritual self is really important. Sure.
What's the difference between irritable bowel syndrome and colitis? How do you know?
So anytime you hear the itis, it means inflammation, right? So appendicitis, colitis, pericarditis, sinusitis, right? It's an itis, it's an inflammation. I would say we live in a bodycitis. We're all inflamed because of the stress and the lifestyles that we live in. So colitis is your colon, itis, and that's usually for a few different causes. One, you can have microscopic colitis, which is as you age, you kind of have the vasculature gets inflamed, and that could be a cause of diarrhea. You can have colitis from a bacteria or a virus, and that can cause an inflammation in your bowels, in your colon. You can have inflammatory bowel disease, like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, and those are types of colitis. Those are autoimmune colitis, colitis, and that's more and more studying the association with introducing probiotics, prebiotics, which are the stuff that feed the probiotics, like fiber. And so the difference is IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is, well, if you look at under microscopy at the bowel, there's changes. So if you had a pathologist look at a bowel specimen of someone that has irritable bowel syndrome, there are changes. They're not universal. Inflammation is not the primary thing that you're seeing. Whereas if I do a CT scan of someone who has a colitis, and I look at the bowels, I can see there's telltale signs of inflammation like fat stranding or thickened bowel wall, etc. So those are kind of, I'm getting more into my doctor talk, medical doctor talk, but it doesn't translate as well. So just if you ever hear itis, it means inflammation, and that inflammation can be infectious, it can be autoimmune, it can be XYZ.
That lemon balm extract and the chamomile, that kind of interests me because I have a sleep apnea situation. What would be applicable dosage? Some is good, more is better.
So number one for sleep apnea, CPAP, right? So
I have a one.
It's a BiPAP ST with the back.
Okay, perfect. So mixing chamomile and lemon balm is one of, I think, the first things I learned from Dr. Katie when I was starting this journey with her. And that is, it's great. You can mix, maybe boil 2 bags of tea, steep it for about 10 minutes, and you can add about 20 to 40, let's say 30 drops of the tincture. A tincture is just an alcohol that extracts the active ingredient from the plant, and add that to your tea. Drink it, take a hot shower, and get right into bed. Brush your teeth.
And turmeric, in what form? I mean,
So that's a great question. You can have, for me, I live in Manhattan and there are lots of spice markets and it's cheap. So I can go, I take a big bag and I get as much turmeric as I can and I add a 1/4 teaspoon a day in hot water with a 1/4 teaspoon of ginger. And that's very good for anti-inflammatory, but you can take a pill. The pharmacy next to us compounds ginger and turmeric together, and the dose you want is about 1,000 milligrams a day. And there's probably, at this point, maybe 50 different brands that are also making turmeric.
so it is just the powder form, the spice.
Yeah, exactly the same. So the active ingredient is curcumin. And so when you buy it at a pharmacy, you will see curcumin because it's extracted the active ingredient out.
Is that related to cumin, the spice?
No,
No, okay.
but good question. I should say I don't believe.
Yeah, turmeric is the spice that gives like yellow mustard its color. So it's very, very bright, right? You have to be careful about it staining your things. So I'm very fascinated to hear, and you must have to brush your teeth after you do your turmeric in the morning, right? Because otherwise your teeth would be actually pretty yellow. There's actually recipes online too for something called golden milk, which is you can make at night, which is very, very nice before bed instead of a glass of wine. You can actually warm up like almond milk or some kind of nut milk alternative. Put some turmeric in there, maybe a little ginger. I've seen other ones with like cardamom and poppy seeds and cinnamon. And you kind of just like blend all this stuff together, maybe a little bit of dates and that kind of stuff. It makes a really nice, beautiful yellow milk before bed that kind of helps you sort of, slide into sleep. Yeah.
That's more my issue. I don't have stomach problems.
Just sleep, the sleep stuff. Yeah, sleep is a big problem for a lot of patients, and we didn't really talk about that today in the context of this lecture, but of course that's very important, right? Because if we're not restoring ourselves, our body doesn't function so well. So we certainly could have an offline conversation about that. Sure.
So if you're experiencing stomach issues, would we come to see your practice first, or go the traditional route of going to see a gastroenterologist, a urologist, whatever, and find out with x-rays and scans and that sort of thing, or see you?
I think her question is basically like, what kind of doctor do you see first if you're having GI issues? And the answer is probably to see your primary care doctor first. That's the most important point of contact, so that your primary care is involved in the care and can kind of guide you. Oftentimes, I've talked to my primary care doctor about different things, and he's pointing me exactly in the right direction. So that's somewhere I would stop first. Often people see a gastroenterologist, and that's a good thing to do, especially if you're over 50, because everybody needs a colonoscopy. So if you are having some digestive issues and you need your colonoscopy anyway, it seems like those things could go together. If you are having other sort of female problems, of course, involving like your gynecologist or a urologist can be really helpful too. But we tend to be one of the more late stops in the medical journey. So most times when people come to us, they've already had like a colonoscopy, they've had a biopsy, they've had the EGD, they've had maybe a sonogram, or they've had a CT scan, or they've tried 3 different medications and none of it worked. So it just kind of depends where you are on your comfort level, and also like how long your symptoms have been lasting. So if something is kind of acute, meaning that it's just been a couple of days to a couple of weeks, then sort of going a traditional medical route makes more sense. But if something you've been struggling with for 5 years, then maybe going a little bit more alternative might be your way. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your attention. We really appreciate it.